Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hope Strategy Podcast. Corey Blake here along with Josh Dimley as usual. What's up, Josh?
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we had a great conversation this episode with Tyler Farnsworth, one of my friends that I've known him for maybe, probably 4 or 5 years since I met him. And we were friends right off the bat. We've done some work together as well. And I was happy to have a conversation with him. As the founder of August United, Tyler always has influencer marketing on the brain. Tyler is passionate about telling incredible stories, building and leading award-winning teams, and helping brands connect with the people they serve. He is on a crusade to rid the world of boring marketing and has extensive experience in influencer marketing strategy, team management, and social media strategy. This focus has helped Tyler lead August United on a rocket ship growth path of 345% over the past 3 years, helping August United become known as an industry-leading agency. Tyler has built a reputation of challenging organizations to be bold in their marketing. This tenacity has helped August United execute hundreds of campaigns for leading companies, including the Kroger Company, PetSmart, you may have heard of them, Microsoft, another small company, P.F. Chang's, See's Candies, Persil Pro Clean, Renews It, Norwegian Cruise Lines, and many more. All great campaigns were made possible by incredible clients that had the guts to say yes. Tyler is a proud father of 4 boys, a fluent Spanish speaker, a Jurassic Park aficionado, an active outdoorsman, and a lover of pizza and classic pinball. Long story short, Tyler has a really cool story and we talk about this, his story of getting into marketing and kind of finding his lane professionally is a really cool one that started in college and kind of had this natural growth that he went down. And he worked for this company called SiteWire. So they were well known, and I've known quite a few people that work for them, but they did something interesting where as they grew, at one point they decided, hey, instead of being this huge agency with a ton of different specialties, let's just break out into, I think, 7 different more like micro agencies and start 7 different companies that are hyper focused on one thing. So whether it was like paid search marketing or SEO or website development or whatever. And Tyler's thing that he had been doing since the beginning of his career was influencer marketing. And so he became the founder and the partner of August United, which broke off of SiteWire and has worked with, like we said in the intro, a ton of amazing brands and done some really cool projects. And yeah, I wanted to talk to him because of his expansive knowledge on social media. I had just recently watched a documentary called The Social Dilemma, which I think we've talked about on the podcast already. I was curious. I was like, who do I know that's a social media expert? Well, I happen to know Tyler Farnsworth, the founder of this huge influencer marketing agency.
Well, it's interesting to get Tyler's input on the whole state of influencer marketing and social media, because there is so much controversy going on right now where we've kind of come out of this, oh, wow, this is this new cool thing, Facebook, Twitter, social media, all this stuff, to it seems like over the past 1 to 2 years, maybe in light of what happened with Cambridge Analytica during the 2016 election, but it seems like there's been this backlash where people are saying, wait a second, these companies are too powerful and they can manipulate us. And so now we're going through people dropping off of social media and saying, I don't want anything to do with it. And yet influencer marketing is still this powerful thing. And these companies are still powerful and have a lot of influence, which can be used for bad things, but it can also be used for good things.
Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating to me because I still hear people, again, so you and I own and run a full service digital marketing agency, MWI. And what we do for work is very much tied to a lot of like that stuff that you're talking about, Facebook and the Chamber Analytica stuff. I mean, the big thing there was like what type of data and information about people they were capturing and then how they were using it, right? And for political purposes or whatever. Like it's an interesting world to live in because we do all of this for amazing companies and amazing brands, and we help them get found and sell product and sell services and all these things through all of these different types of ways that we can pull data and information and analytics and translate that into strategic digital marketing strategies. But there's also this really dark side to how you leverage all of that knowledge, tools, information, and everything to do it the wrong way. And what some people may argue is an invasion of privacy and, whatever. So it's fascinating to talk to other industry leaders on this subject that I think is there's always going to be good product, good services, good people that need good marketing. And I don't think that's going anywhere. I loved our conversation with Tyler because he talked about a lot of the core values of his company and saying like, look, influencers out there, like the term influencer has a bad rep in 2020 in a lot of conversations, right? It's been, I don't know. We're a little bit jaded by this whole idea of like, oh, look at me and look how famous I am on Instagram or whatever. But the way that they leverage, and he said in the conversation, he doesn't even really like to and I actually have worked with them, and they don't refer to the people that they work with as influencers just because it's kind of objectifying them a little bit. You know, it's working with brand ambassadors. It's working with people that know a product, love a product, or it's working with brands that have a good message or have a good product or have a good service, and kind of getting the behind the scenes on how they leverage really strategic marketing strategies to help these big brands grow and see tremendous, opportunity in their marketing is something that, I don't know. It's fascinating. And again, we're a bit jaded to it too. You've been in this world for 20 plus years, right? I've been in it for 10 and I have conversations still with people that are like, well, it's the darndest thing. I did a search for something on, Amazon. And then for the next 3 days, it kept popping up everywhere on my Facebook, Well, yeah, that was very strategic. And there's a process to all of that. Anyways, I love talking to other marketers. And again, Tyler's somebody who's done it and built a company and done it on a very high level for some big names and big brands. And he has a lot of really cool insight into the whys and the hows of digital marketing, specifically as it pertains to social media. We did not talk about his love of Jurassic Park. It came up a little bit. I wanted to ask him more about that and why we didn't talk about that very much. Or pinball. And there's a place here for my son's 9th birthday. I took him to this local arcade that has all of these classic, like a ton of really cool classic pinball machines. And it's right up the street from where Tyler lives. So I assume he's a regular there. I'm gonna have to call him and see if he wants to meet up with the boys and go play some pinball, because we didn't talk about that either. The other thing we didn't talk about, and I texted Tyler after and told him that we needed to have another conversation if we want to go this route on the podcast. He's big time into politics, both local and national. And I was going to ask him some questions on that, but we ran out of time. So maybe next time we'll dive into, I wanted to specifically talk about politics and how social media and marketing tie into some of the political campaigns that we see, whether local or national presidential stuff. But anyways, didn't get to it. We'll get to it next time. Please enjoy this conversation with Tyler Farnsworth, the founder and chief growth officer of August United.
Something is happening in our world. Time is very precious.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
Hope in the face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty.
I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley.
Hey guys, good morning.
Hey, good morning, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm glad we were able to accommodate and move it up 15 minutes or so. Two interviews this morning. And you guys are going to be gassed at the end or fired up because it was so good. I have been able to listen to a couple other episodes apart from the Elder Holland episode. And gosh, the stories are great, right? When I listened to your episode as well. And, even though we know each other, there's so much I learned about your background and the empathy that it's funny, right? When you can unpack an individual, there's so much empathy gained. And often we see people on a very surface level and it's like, hey, I know this guy. He's a great individual who is leading a great organization. He's a great father. And I have no idea, the iceberg underneath, right? Yeah. And I mean that in a very positive way, like the collection of experiences that have culminated in who you are today. And yeah, so I love that just the general structure of what you guys are doing here. And the stories have been very, very rich. And I hope awesome. I can measure up in any sense today. From what I know, and we can tell by the cacti shirt that you're wearing today, you are an Arizona guy, right? Were you born and raised in Arizona? I am. I'm a proud Arizonan. Yeah, tell us about growing up and all that. Yeah, I want to hear all about it. I'm a 6th generation Arizonan. Wow. So I go back a bit. Frankly, since before Arizona was a state. Arizona was the 48th state in the United States of America. It became a state in 2012. But my family came here when it was a territory. And I love that. I love looking back into the history of why they came down, and they came down to settle and create a life. And those of you who have been to Arizona, the Arizona of today is more developed, but it is rooted in this great Western ideal of the challenger, the maverick, the individual that bucks against the trend and creates an outcome in places that are frankly kind of inhospitable. And I've taken a lot of that to heart. I love it. I mean, you see the cactus shirt here. I've lived away from Arizona a bit, but my home is here and I love everything about it. Even the heat, even the scorpions, the beautiful sunsets, the cacti. Most importantly, I think that maverick rebel spirit that emanates from the folks who founded and live here.
It's funny you say that. My dad, every time he comes to visit me here in Arizona, he's always like, where does all the water come from? Like, how is there green? Like, it always blows his mind. And it's funny, like he'll drive through like out kind of where, at least where I think you live, like out in like Morrison Ranch and stuff where, it's just green fields everywhere and the irrigation's awesome, whatever. And he's like, where? He's just like this, blows his mind every time. Cause he's like, how are we in the desert, but there's like green grass and beautiful parks? Like it's so funny. You have that, like that analogy of being here in Phoenix, like the plant that's growing through the crack in the cement a little bit, like this huge, beautiful area that if we could go back in time to when your family settled here, like it was an absolute desert wasteland, right? It was just miles and miles of sand and cactus.
Think about you talk about hope, right? Think about the faith and hope it would have taken. And I'm separating those two words, but thinking about what it would have taken to say, you know what? Yeah, we're going to stay here. Like, I think I would have stopped in Flagstaff, right? Like there's trees and it's beautiful and it snows and there's all kinds of great, but they made their way to the Phoenix Valley and in some parts even further south toward the border, and said, yeah, we're going to farm this. And yes, there were ancient, from the Native Americans, there were ancient canal systems and things like that, but those weren't really functional, right? There was a lot of work that had to be done, a lot of, grimy, tough work that had to be done to make a farm, right? To grow something. And, while I didn't grow up as a farmer, my grandfather did. He farmed in Mexico. He owned a huge grape vineyard in Mexico. He farmed here in Chandler, Arizona. He farmed in St. George, Utah. He farmed pecans up there. So I learned a lot of that world of creating a crop and planting it and hoping that it's going to, sprout and survive. And it's caused me to think about a couple of things. There's this story that talks about the Chinese bamboo, right? And the Chinese bamboo seed, you put in the ground, you water it, you fertilize it, you nurture it. And after year 1, it's still dirt. You continue to fertilize it. You can continue to water it. You continue to nurture it. After year 2, it's still dirt, all the way up until year 5 or so. And in year 5, this thing finally sprouts. And what you don't know is that there's stuff that's been happening. There's stuff that's been going on, potentially root systems that have been being built. And once it sprouts, it grows like 3 feet a day. It grows like 90 feet in a month. Wow. And you look at this and it seems like this overnight success story. But what you haven't looked at is all of the growth, the nurture, the water, the fertilizer that's been occurring for that period of time before this incredible growth. And those of us, I've been raised in this entrepreneurial household, and those of us who have, and I think there's a lot of folks out there who have had any sort of like desire to build something and grow something. You have to have some of that, right? Some of that desire to say, is this thing going to sprout? Is this thing going to grow 3 feet in a day at some point? Or is it still just going to look like a bunch of dirt? And even with all the effort and time and energy I'm putting in.
And you've seen that firsthand with August United and with the thing that you've built. I've watched that, right? I've been, very early on when you were kind of getting started on that. And I want to get to that here in a second, because I'm fascinated by that whole story and I'm excited to hear about it. So you grew up outside of Phoenix. What did you do growing up? Like, what were the things that you would say at this point, now that you're a father of 4?
4 boys.
4 boys. Yep. Father of 4 boys, married to your awesome wife. You're building a business and a life here in Arizona. When you look back, what were some of the things that kind of built that molded you as you were growing up? What were some of the things you did, or maybe some of the mentors that you had that when you can reflect back, you say, man, those things kind of led me to where I'm at now?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned my grandfather, but my grandfather is one of those. My father is a huge mentor, and guide has been a great guide throughout my life. He's an entrepreneur. He built a business. He's an attorney. He built a law firm that he grew over the course of 30 years or so. So I come from a family of 7 children. I'm the oldest of 7 children. Oh, wow. There's a lot going on in that house, a lot of great things going on in that house. But we grew up on a bit of land here in Phoenix, and there was a lot of grass that had to be mowed, a lot of things that had to occur to keep that property in a place that it was presentable. And real early on, my father, I remember during the summer, he would post this job board, right? And you could go and you could grab a job down from the board, and there was an outcome that you would receive, some sort of minimal payment or, treat or reward or whatever that was.
So it was a job board for the family. It was a job board
for the family. Yes. And you could choose to go up there and say, hey, I'm going to take this job off and I'm going to go mow the entire lawn, or I'm going to prune the tree, or I'm going to, edge the lawn, or whatever that thing was. And it said the job and it said the outcome or the result that you would receive. Right. And we had our own chores that were just expected to be part of daily life, but this was above and beyond. At an early age, instilled this love of work, but also a desire to reach for the golden ring, right? You could choose 4 jobs if you want, or you could choose 0, right? You could sit and turn on the Nintendo or sit down and play a game or do whatever. And that's all fine and well. But I learned from an early age that there was value in work and that it was actually my decision, right? There wasn't this overlord that said you had to do this. There was a desire to go and say, hey, I'm going to build that. I'm going to find a more efficient way to mow the lawn. I'm going to do whatever these things are. And, I appreciate that in a huge way. There was a neighbor of ours as well who was this great gardener. And I remember him, kind of taking me and my brother under his wing at one point. And he said, hey, I need some help getting some fertilizer, some manure for the garden. So we went down to a local dairy. He gave us a couple shovels. We were shoveling that manure into his truck. Went back. It's dirty. It was hard work, but he just, again, instilled these lessons of work and that the outcome. I remember at the time he bought us like a drink from a local convenience store. And that's all, we didn't do it for the drink. We did it because we wanted to help him out. And then he also paid us on the back end. And I didn't expect that either, but I was young at the time, and it clicked for me that, hey, there's an opportunity to get good at a craft, to get out there, to serve, to do things. And, I think it helped instill this level of, I can build my future. It's not going to be just given to me. It's not going to be just, my life isn't just going to happen. I can create it. And that's really, I think, some of the background that I come from.
I love that, by the way. I've got kids too. I've got 4 kids, and I'm constantly trying to figure out how to instill this love of learning and love of working, like figuring out how to, be excited to work. And did that help you develop early on, that background? Did it help you develop early on what you wanted to do for a career? Or did that come later? Just when did you kind of start to realize what you wanted to do professionally?
I think those early elements helped me to understand that I wanted to create my future, right? I didn't want to just work, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but I didn't want to necessarily work for someone else my entire life, right? Like I wanted to build and own the future that I had. So as I looked at the world of marketing, that kind of came over time. Very early on, I was introduced to video production and video editing. This was in like 1998, 99. The world we're in today is very different than it was then, right? So yes, I mean, SVHS or VHS tapes. My father in his high school time, he was introduced to nonlinear editing and linear editing as well. And so he had purchased this device that was literally a video editor machine.
I took video production in 7th grade, and I remember that's machine, like get the 2 tapes in there and like go back and go. Yeah.
It was crazy. Awesome. And this was called a Casablanca. And it was this device that sole purpose was editing video. And that was again, this opening for me to where it's like, oh my gosh, I can make stories and pull things together and create art in this way that's different, right? Like I wasn't necessarily a person that drew or that performed in a choir, in a play in that way. but I could build art that made sense for me. And that was fun. And so it started with skate videos and snowboarding videos and these kinds of things. But then it moved into stuff I was doing for school and work I did in student council, which I was this historian in high school, right? So telling this end of the year video yearbook around what were happening or what's going on. And that's, I would say, a fairly common thing that happens today. In the early 2000s, not as common. And it allowed me to really kind of create this sense of being a storyteller and helping people find value in stories. And that took root. That was something I said, hey, I love this. I love what's going on. There's so much in the world of advertising that was appealing and interesting to me, but I also felt there was a lot that was frankly obnoxious, boring, manipulative. There were just things that didn't align with me. And I would say that one of my earliest memories around like thinking that, hey, I'd like to go into this world of storytelling and advertising was when I watched the movie Minority Report. So it was a Tom Cruise movie. I don't know if either of you guys watched that film or remember that movie, right? But, it was set in this dystopian future that was supposed to be very, scary and odd. And, they could predict before you were going to commit the crime. But that's not the point. The point is that they were building this future where the lead character would go into, and he went into a clothing store. It was a Gap or something like that. And as he went in, this device read his retina and, welcomed him and said, hey, welcome back. How are those shirts, performing for you?
I need to watch the movie again. I bet there's a lot of interesting. I haven't seen that.
It was awesome. He left that store and then he walked under an underpass and the billboard dynamically changed. Yeah, it dynamically changed because it knew he was walking past, and it was supposed to be super creepy. And it got me super excited. Because I was like, oh my gosh, is that that's the future of where advertising can go? And rather than it being creepy, my thought was, can I be a force for good that allows advertising to be more useful, more interesting, more engaging and less disruptive, less annoying, less intrusive? And I would say that was really the seed that planted within me to say, hey, I'd like to do this. And that has evolved over the years to be me being in the realm I'm in now, and the realm I'm in now won't be the realm I'm in 5 years from now. But that was, I'd say, the seed that started it.
That's interesting. I need to go back and watch that movie because now we look at that through a completely different lens, right? Now you're like, oh yeah, there was a pixel on that thing, and then he was retargeted as he walked under the whatever. It's kind of interesting. I got to go back and watch that. But you had a mentor at ASU, at one of your marketing professors, right? Isn't that kind of how you, if I remember correctly from a conversation we had a long time ago, but didn't one of your professors at ASU kind of spot you and say, hey, that guy's got some skill, and then kind of towards the end of a marketing class or something, slip you a job offer or something like that?
Oh, you're pretty spot on. So I really enjoyed and appreciated my time at WP Carey at Arizona State University. And one of the classes I was most excited to take at the time was called digital marketing, right? It's now evolved and there's so much more content in there, but it was really the only course that focused on digital marketing. Everything else was larger advertising and marketing, which is needed, right, to give you the background and structure. This course was taught by an adjunct professor named Brett Giles. This was a gentleman who owned an agency in Tempe. And so I was thrilled to meet with him. I loved all the professors, but I really loved adjunct professors, folks who were in the middle of it, right? Out there in the living, they're getting seat time in the living of it. And his course was fantastic. I was a couple years older than a lot of my peers in that course. I had a couple kids already. I was working a full-time job as I was going to school. I was just eating it up. And I focused throughout my whole degree program, but I really loved that course. And I had the opportunity to take a couple of vacation days and volunteer for an event that this professor had. And it was at that event that I got to know him even further. And like you mentioned, at the end of the semester, I was presented with a job opportunity to join his firm. It's funny because that is the nature that brought me from the job I was in and brought me into that agency that I was at for several years. Frankly, I'm still within the holding company realm of that initial agency. So I still have the opportunity to work with that professor even today, several years later. I didn't see it then necessarily. I couldn't foresee the entirety of the future that would happen. There's a bit of a leap of faith. And I think that's what a lot of us go through, is you can't necessarily see the full future of what's going to occur when there is an opportunity presented to you, or when you have an opportunity to make a significant change. I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. I love everything to do with it. Ian Malcolm, he has this quote that says, all major changes are like death. You can't see the other side until you're there. And, that was this leap of faith, right? To say like, man, should I do this? Here's a great opportunity. I've found that throughout my life, saying yes to opportunities, taking that leap of faith are where I have flourished the most. And if there are any regrets I have, and there are very few that I have, but if there are, it's when I've taken the safe route. It's when I've taken the easier route rather than taking that leap. Every time I've taken the leap, it has resulted in some really great outcomes. Not to say there haven't been failures. There certainly have, and I cherish those, but taking the leap has always been a great outcome for me.
There was just a random bit of trivia there that was funny, which is Brett's company SiteWire started in 1999, and MWI originally started in 1999 as MindWire. So I just thought, that's interesting. Random.
I love it. Yeah. SiteWire is where I originally started. So I went over to a group where I ran a conference, a marketing conference first, called the Bolo Conference. Yeah. And that was a conference for other agencies.
Are you still doing that?
Well, we've shifted it. So rather than it being an agency focused conference, it's now a conference that's focused toward marketers, brand marketers. And so we held it last year. We are not holding it this year. The world's kind of crazy right now. So it's always been an in-person conference. We held it every year for over 10 years. Yeah. And then I transitioned in, and then in 2015 is when I broke out there and launched August United.
Okay. So I want to talk about that transition. So you got the job at SiteWire. You went over, you started doing influencer marketing from the get-go, right? Weren't you on the influencer marketing team?
Yeah.
You definitely have had a firsthand look at the social media marketing and the social media landscape since very, very early on. I mean, I think it was 2013, I think 2013, right? That you started as an influencer marketing strategist at SiteWire. So
correct.
That industry has changed so drastically. Before we jump into some of the logistics of how, because I'm curious on SiteWire and August United and stuff. What was that like initially? What do you remember of the world in 2013? I mean, just as a marketer myself, Facebook had been around for a number of years. Instagram was about a year old. YouTube was pretty new. So what was the landscape like at that point when you came in, and what were some of the things you were working on as a strategist for influencer marketing in 2013?
Yeah, it was still relatively new in the way that we talk about it today. I mean, the concept of influencers or influential people in the world of advertising is not new, right? It's been around since the advent of advertising, the advent of selling anything, I guess, or making any sort of transaction. But in the way we talk about it today, there was still a lot of discussion, right? Getting in front of C-suites, getting in front of CMOs, explaining why you should partner your organization with an individual like this versus with a larger media entity was a lift. At the time, the world of blog and blogging was still fairly large. I would say it was starting to sunset, but that you had this huge world of mom blogs and things like that had a big lift for several years. And so that was still a big part of the process and strategy. The social networks were pumping, but the world that exists today wasn't exactly the same. And so we've seen it evolve in a huge way as more and more folks have spent time in YouTube and in Instagram and the advent of other platforms, most notably TikTok that have happened, and just some of the ways that has shifted. You've seen influencer marketing really become a staple of a great marketing mix.
Define influencer marketing, because you mentioned this, and it's something that I've talked with people a lot about. There's this negative connotation, especially with maybe younger generations or something, but there's this negative connotation with this term influencer as it pertains to social media or something, where people are like selling out online, on Instagram or whatever, and they'll post anything just to get some money or some free product or whatever. But, and to a lot of people, it seems like this new idea, but you mentioned something that I brought up multiple times, which is influencer marketing has always been a part of any sort of advertising. I mean, I don't know how far back you would go, but any sort of, sponsorship, Michael Jordan selling Gatorade or shoes, in the 80s and 90s, that was influencer marketing, right? It was just through a different medium. And now, obviously the playing field has been leveled completely because anybody can take content and post it and get people to like it or follow it or whatever. But for anybody that's listening that doesn't understand influencer marketing as you guys do it today, how would you define what that is and what it is that August United does?
At its core, it's uniting impressive people with impressive organizations, bringing people together. Like you mentioned, celebrity has become democratized, right? Like anybody can create a TV channel today, right? Anybody has an ability to create content that reaches the masses, that reaches millions. The world is flatter and more connected than it's ever been. And I think that's a great thing. Like anything, it can be used incorrectly. You can have things that just don't land or don't feel right. But, I wholeheartedly agree with folks. I roll my eyes often. I don't know that I even love the term influencer. I believe that all of us are influential. I think every person is an influencer in their realm. The difference is how large is your megaphone, right? How many folks are paying attention or listening to the things you have to say. To me, it actually has nothing to do with just the quantity of followers. It has a lot more to do with the people that care what you have to say. And, so like anything, it can be used or done in a way that's, again, like we mentioned earlier in the interview, that's obnoxious, that's interruptive, that's not useful, or it can be really cool, right? It can be in a way that someone says, man, that thing is neat, or that idea is neat, or that product is cool, or I'd like to go to that, that event or that place or that hotel, or I'd like to learn more about that cause that this person is talking about. And we found that people have a desire to learn from other people much more than they have a desire to learn from a brand. We are humans. We like connecting with people. And at its core, really, that's what influencer marketing is people telling great stories. And those have to be told well.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And you guys have worked with, if I remember, the Kroger brands, like that's like Smith's and Fry's and right. So the grocery stores, you worked with Microsoft, PF Chang's, Purcell, See's Candies. You guys have worked with some big brands doing some awesome stuff. And from what I've gathered, you were able to work with some of these big brands fairly early on in the growth of August United, meaning like you didn't have the biggest team at the moment. You didn't have, obviously you had resources because you were coming from SiteWire as a kind of a break off new startup, but talk to me a little bit about how in in this maybe 2015, 2016, but just because of the state of the world that we live in and the access to technology that we have. And, like you said, the democratization of people because of technology. How are you able to work with some of these really big brands? Because the way I look at it is in this, let's say the 80s or even 90s or something, like you would have had to be a big firm in LA or Chicago or New York or something to work with some of these brands and provide value for them, right? Like the resources you would have had were different. You guys have been able to provide immense value. I've seen the campaigns that you've run for some big organizations from a very early stage as you guys were getting going. How does that work?
Yeah, no, great question. So we've been very fortunate. It's been really neat to, we often say that it all starts with people or clients that have the guts to say yes, right? People that are willing to stand out. And to your point, if you look at the Mad Men style era of advertising, yeah, you had to be a big Madison Avenue firm. And that's no longer the case. Organizations, by and large, want to work with people that are excited, that are going to give them the time of day. They're going to focus on their story, that are going to be fully invested in the work they're going to be doing. Frankly, folks that are specialized, we see that a lot. It's not enough to just be able to do everything okay, but rather do one thing really, really well. And that's where a lot of our focus has been, is saying, hey, what is that one thing we can do incredibly well? So it's as much about what we don't do. We say a lot that, hey, we don't do these other things, right? We don't build websites. We don't do SEO. We don't, right? So many of these other elements, we focus on this one thing and do it very well. And then we've told our story. And I know I keep mentioning that, but we've told our story in a way that is very approachable, that is very human, that showcases that this type of marketing and advertising is human, right? There's often desires to automate it in a huge way. I believe that at its core, this is a very human tactic in the world of advertising. And another thing that I would really key in on here is, in any sort of business, we talk a lot about ROI, right? The return on your investment. And often that goes down to sales or actions taken. And those things are all great. You have to know what you're getting, or it doesn't make sense to continue to invest time and energy and effort. But what I really think we should be talking about is R.O.R, the return on relationship. And I've found that the growth of August United has been spurred and has really been an outcome of the relationships that we've been able to build. The people behind these brands. We look at brands, and when I was young, I would look at brands and they're these huge elements, these huge things that are inanimate objects. And as you get into the world of business, you realize that they're just run by people like you and I. Yeah. And these people are great and they want to work with other great people. And when that clicked for me, and I think it clicked fairly early on in life, but when that clicked for me, a lot of the mystique of, oh man, I don't know where this new young shop can we compete? Can we go against some of these bigger, agencies, or do we deserve to be at the table for some of these big, well-known brands? I think a lot of that just goes away and you say, hey, yeah, we have great stories to tell.
Why not us?
Let's help folks out.
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, again, we keep saying it, right? But it's been interesting to watch as value at the end of the day, at this point, value wins, right? Whoever can provide that value. And I love that R.O.R, like that return on relationship. I mean, I've seen that so much personally in building a business as well. That's in many ways much more important than even the ROI side of it, right?
Tyler, I'm curious, who are some of the people that you feel like are doing things the right way on the influencer side? And what are some of the companies? What are some examples you've seen of companies doing it the right way?
I think folks that lean into just being very transparent, right? Just very them. Folks who I look up to, folks that I look out at and say, hey, this person understands who they are. They're willing to bring in stories in unique ways. From a brand standpoint, we'll start with brand. I think Chipotle does a great job. I really do. I think they understand their brand. I think they understand their customer. You'll notice if you go back in their Instagram feed, they had a fairly dramatic shift in strategy a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, they had these very polished, delicious looking images that frankly just blended in with everything else online. Yep. It was their burritos and their burrito bowls and these sorts of things. But they shifted strategy into a very meme focused social media. And that works for them. It won't necessarily work for everybody, but it was very self-aware, very much focused on the customer and the lifestyle around their customer. And their influencer strategy has mirrored that. They have worked with great esports organizations and esports stars. They've done a lot of work with David Dobrik, who is a big YouTube personality, came from Vine originally, I believe. He has a great podcast. But this, individual, they knew that he, while being this big influencer personality, they knew that he had a true love for the brand. And so they've done some unique partnerships together with him. They even created a David Dobrik burrito, and had this unique day where they drove traffic to their online app. It was at that point, it was their largest or biggest selling day that they'd ever had online. They've created these Chipotle gold cards that give a burrito a day to certain key people that they've selected. They've had a lot of fun with it, and it hasn't been overly done or overly forced, or people just holding up a burrito and saying, buy Chipotle. You know, we often, refer to that as the Truman Show effect, right? Like if you remember that great Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show, where his wife in the middle of just them having dinner would like hold up a knife and say, this knife cuts and slices and dices and buy it now. That's everything that's wrong with influencer marketing today, in my opinion, when it's just very out there and very forced. And so you look at these people, and there are a number, but you look at these folks who are out there that, they bring products in, but more importantly, they weave it naturally into the course of who they are. Those are the folks that I think are up to good things or up to good work, or these are just natural. Their brand partnerships are natural extensions of who they are. And they're very transparent with you on what they're bringing in versus it being overly forced.
What's the worst case scenario you've ever seen come about?
Within our agency or just generally out there?
Just
in the world?
Just generally. Like, when is influencer marketing blown up in somebody's face because they did it the wrong way?
Yeah, there are a few, but we've seen influencer marketing enter the political fray in a huge way in this election season. And we're not going to go too deep into that, but Mike Bloomberg was one of the Democrat individuals that are running for the Democratic nomination. And he spent a ton of money on an influencer program.
Numbers were insane how much money, like from one day to the next, he started putting into some digital marketing. It was
we're not just talking a ton of money for you and me. We're talking about a ton of money for Bloomberg.
$250 million or something.
Oh, I mean, his whole campaign, he spent an enormous amount of money on the influencer side of it. Exactly. I don't know, but yes, an enormous amount of money. Yeah. And he went out there and he hired, Jerry Media, and he hired a lot of these meme accounts. And it was just odd. I am the type of person that loves odd marketing. I love people who break out of the shell. I love people who challenge the status quo. But this did not hit the mark. It was just completely cringeworthy. And it was very clearly someone who was, they like photoshopped his face into a meatball and sauce, right? Like it was just these, and then the official campaign was retweeting these things. And I don't know whether it was this attempt to appeal to the youth or what it might have been, but it was very much a hello fellow kids moment. And it was not good.
There's good odd and there's bad odd.
Yeah. Yeah, there are. And, the other things we see sometimes where it's just so apparent, there's Scott Disick, who is part of the Kardashian world. He has gone out there and he had a shake company that he was promoting, and he literally copied and pasted whatever the agency or promoter group had sent to him. And it said, here, Scott, at 4 p.m. Eastern, post this. And he copied all of that, right? And posted it into the Instagram feed. And it said, here, Scott, at 4 p.m. Eastern, post this. I love my booty shake, right? And those kinds of things are just so obnoxious. And those are the types of things that are wrong. And I see it all the time. And I'm a person that I have an average social following as a normal person, right? Like I'm not a celebrity in that way. And I see this automated side of influencer marketing that comes out that says, hey, Tyler, we'd like you to be an ambassador for this thing. And it has no relation to me or anything that I'm about. And that's the kind of stuff that needs to needs to stop now.
Yeah, there was kind of an arc where influencer marketing through social media and YouTube and stuff became a thing. And then there were a lot of automated tools and automated services and things that kind of came out of that, and new industries were created. And then it feels like people got pretty exhausted with that pretty quick. There was a lot of like market fatigue. And then it seems like it's gotten better. Like you're talking about that Chipotle example is really good. Maybe 4 years ago, Chipotle would have done that a little bit differently. Sure. But now I agree with you that the authenticity wins, right? The authentic brands, the genuine ones that are transparent, that are self-aware, and I've seen that in campaigns that you guys have ran that have been amazing and others out there. I love, what Nike's done, big brand, but like they seem to be very aware of what's going on around them and where they fit into the whole thing. There's a lot of cool brands that have done that. So I want to, this is kind of a good transition going back to that Bloomberg thing real quick. Did you see the documentary, The Social Dilemma?
I have.
Okay. So have I. I don't think Josh has watched it yet. Josh, have you seen it yet?
No, not yet. I'm a little bit behind the times.
Tell Josh to watch it, and this is like Josh with telling me to read books and then I don't. Now I'm telling him to watch a documentary and he doesn't. So if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, it's a documentary on Netflix, and it basically interviews and tells the story of the growth of social media, the growth of search engines, the growth of basically the internet as we know it today, from the point of view of a lot of those people who were members of founding teams at Instagram, Facebook, Google, that built these tools, who now have come out in a documentary and are talking about a lot of the dangers and concerns that they have with the social media world. And again, a lot of and the internet generally, but specifically social media and the effect that it's having on us as individuals, on the up and coming generations, on children, the addictions that we have, the way that you talked about with the Minority Report, that we're fed information that is completely customized to us as individuals. A lot of people still are not aware that even though, Tyler, for example, you and I, or probably more realistically, me and my, great, or my aunt or something like that, like some family member, we may both have Facebook and we may both spend time on Facebook, but Facebook is a completely different experience for each of us, right? Sure. We are seeing different content. It's like if one of us is reading, Entrepreneur Magazine and one of us is reading Us Weekly or something, right? It's completely different content that we're being fed as a result of a lot of this science and these algorithms that have been built and stuff. So my question, that's the preface a little bit. We're a digital marketing agency. We do social media marketing and management and paid search and retargeting, all of these things. And I'm with you where we're constantly trying to find a way. Somebody's got to do it right. Somebody's got to be out there leveraging all of these resources and tools and technologies. There always needs to be room for really good marketing and advertising and branding and all of these things. When we're talking about hope, this documentary came out and I've heard a lot of fear-based conversations in my circles that have watched this, right? That immediately jump to some real drastic, conclusions about the future or about social media and about the internet. As somebody who's in it and every single day in the thick of it, and you've seen this evolution from the time you were at SiteWire right out of college to being the founder and, chief growth officer now of August United and growing this agency. Where do you see from where you sit, what does the future of the internet look like? And specifically in this case, the future of social media. What advice do you have for kind of managing this new world that we live in, both for ourselves and for our kids and for our kids' kids?
It is a big question. It's one I think about a lot, right? I think we all go into life saying, can I make a difference? Or what difference can I make? And is the work I'm in right now making a difference? It's easy when I look at my friends who are doctors in the ER or who are, doing these kinds of things that you look and you're like, wow, this guy's making a difference every day. And I have to sometimes take a step back and say, am I contributing to society in a positive way? Or am I being a detractor, right? Am I creating just more noise? And the social networks themselves, I think that the documentary that was referenced is useful. I think like any documentary, it has an intended goal, right? There's a persuasion element there. I think that these stories were eye-opening. It allowed me to, it caused me to think man, there's so much in there that is accurate in my life, right? These organizations and these networks have been designed to cause us to maximize our time, right? To spend our time in them is what I should say. And in even the minor research I've done here in the time of the pandemic, we've seen screen time, individual screen time, cell phone screen time skyrocket, right? People are spending more time on social networks than they even were pre-pandemic. I think like most things, social media is a tool. And I think it does, we do individually have a need to regulate that tool. And what I mean is self-regulate, not necessarily government regulation, but self-regulation. I have a lot of wonderful experiences on social media. There are things that buoy me up, that boost me up, that give me inspiration to move on. And then there are times that it is a drain and a time suck. We talk a lot, and we've talked a lot about echo chambers, right? And seeing the things that make sense to us, and reinforcing beliefs and opinions. I think in certain ways, the way that these tools are created can be useful. I look and if you were to go through my feed, you would see things on classic pinball and arcade. You would see Jurassic Park things. You would see certain religious things that are important to me. You would see political elements. You would see certainly my friends and the way that they're doing things. But that's how my feed's going to look. And there are a lot of pieces in that and that are good and great and exciting. And then I have to look and say, hey, is it taking time away from the things that are important to me, or is it amplifying the things that are important to me? And so when I watched that, I think it was a wake up call to say, hey, am I spending more time on these platforms than I should be, or is it contributing to the goals that I have? So I think when I look at hope from the hope side of this, it is a tool that is useful. We need to look at it like any tool out there. I'm going to use it and set barriers and boundaries that are appropriate for me in my life. And I'm going to do the same for my kids. Do I have a level of nervousness around it? Yeah, absolutely. I think there is an addictive nature to it. I think there's that for a lot of things in this world. And it just requires that we put the right process in place. We have the right level of allowing ourselves to decide how much time, energy, and effort we're spending on those. And then from an advertising standpoint, ensuring that the work I am doing, the stories I am telling, the things I am contributing into this world of social media are building, are lifting people, are contributing versus tearing people down.
I love it. I appreciate the insight. Are there lines that you've drawn, but as a marketer, so, as somebody who plays a role in what people are seeing on their feeds through strategy, right? And through a lot of these tools and stuff, are there lines that you try not to cross in the whole business side of digital advertising? No, definitely. There are, just high level, there are certain lines of business and types of business that we don't work with. And I'm not going to get into that in depth, but things that we just ultimately are not aligned with as an organization. Tell us everybody that shouldn't call you. No, I'm just kidding. or that we, that ultimately we feel are not bringing additional value to society. And I'm not going to make a judgment on whether those things should or should not exist in the world, because people have their own decision to make for that. But we don't need to spend time. Other folks can, to help their story get out. That said, for the things that we do contribute or we do build, and this comes just back to me personally as well, even outside the agency, of looking at is everything we're doing contributing, right? Contributing contributing in a positive way. Like, is it lifting folks up? Are we putting a piece of content out there that is interesting, that is causing someone to learn, that is causing someone to take an action that would be a benefit to their life? And I don't know that I can be the arbiter of that every time, but by and large, the goal we are trying to do is tell better stories, tell more unique stories. And we do have some lines to say, hey, we don't want to, contribute to the detriment of society. We want to bring hope and light and energy and excitement and fun and humor to these spaces. Most of our work is done in the social feeds, right? That's where most people see the things that we build. We don't do a lot of, out of home or print or TV in that way. Our stuff is on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and YouTube and Twitch. And, that's where we are. On the balance of that, my oldest son's 10, he doesn't have a cell phone, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I love to be outdoors. I love to be outside. I love to disconnect. And I hope more and more people do. I don't want to have this society that is completely glued to screens every day. That does, going back to the earlier question, that does concern me. That does make me nervous. I attended a funeral recently, and I actually like funerals. And that might sound weird to say, but I find that they are often celebrations of life, celebrations of accomplishments, especially when it's someone who has lived a full life. It's certainly different when that's a little different. But, they always cause me to think. They cause me to reflect on my own life and say, hey, what is going to be said about me whenever that day comes?
am I going to be spoken about as someone who contributed to the betterment of society, who lifted people up, who told stories that were worth telling, who was in the battle, who was in the arena, right? We talk about the Teddy Roosevelt quote of the person in the arena. Was I in the arena fighting for things that were worth fighting for? Every time I'm at one of those events, it causes me to recommit to being the kind of person that is going to have things said about the life that I led that brought value, that lifted someone up, that helped someone. And I think that during all times, but certainly during this time of pandemic, I feel like a lot of folks have been a little bit more closed off, a little bit more secluded, not necessarily working in larger groups or larger communities. And, it's time often for us to look out and say, hey, how can I lift? How can I help? How can I be there with someone to help contribute to the betterment of my community and society at large?
I've seen the way your approach, both, I mean, we've worked on projects together, like I said, and I've seen the inner workings of, this isn't smoke that you're blowing, right? I love that about what you're doing. I love that about who you are as a marketer and as a professional and as a, leader. And I've seen it there at your agency. We see the world the same way, and kind of that end goal of that R.O.R, like you put it, and that building great win-win relationships and also providing value at the end of the day. And it's fascinating. Again, that's, when I reached out to you to talk, I love talking to other experts in specific industries. In this case, one that I'm in as well, and in some regards. And it's nice to see from somebody that's in it every day, that has the right outlook and the right ambition, to see kind of where the hope lies, because there's so much fear-based, like I said before, thinking on the future of what all this holds. And I couldn't agree more with kind of the sentiment and what you're saying. So I appreciate it, man. I think, at this point, you're the chief growth officer and founder at August United. Where can people find you, and what value, who might want to reach out to you guys or to you individually to potentially, link up?
I mean, professionally, one of the best places is just on my LinkedIn. I believe that link will be down in the show notes. That's a great way to reach out. Twitter's also a great way. Looking at anything around August United is there at augustunited.com, from a business standpoint. But yeah, I'm always happy to lend support or lend a voice. I love what's going on in the world. I actually think there is a lot of good in the world. I think there's a lot of good being built. I think that people and humanity actually thrives in times of crises. I think that we build a lot of really, really cool things. I've already seen that this year. And, going back, and I'm going to do it here as a Jurassic Park fan. Netflix just released a new Jurassic Park series called Camp Cretaceous.
I actually just watched the trailer last night.
Yeah.
Oh man, the boys would love this.
They would, and they should watch it. It's animated, but adults and children alike would like it. They actually stayed very true. It's part of Jurassic Park canon. It's happening along the same timeline as Jurassic World, the movie Jurassic World.
Ah, okay.
It's awesome. And there's a quote in there that, they said, hey, things fall apart, and that's okay. Because when that happens, we pick up the pieces and we keep going. And I think we've seen a lot of that this year. And humanity thrives in crises. We have to be able to pick ourselves up and say, you know what? I'm going to do something here. I'm going to build something here, and not be afraid to put your art out into the world. One of my favorite marketing authors is a guy named Seth Godin. And he often talks about art, right? And art is not just drawing. It's anything you create. It's anything you build. It's you standing up. It's you, being on a podcast like this, or launching something, or writing a post, or going out there and just building or doing or putting anything out there. And that is a scary thing to do as a human, because you feel like someone's going to make fun of you. And that's true. Probably is going to happen. Someone's going to tell you that you're not doing it right. And that's true. And that's probably going to happen. But there are a whole lot more people that are going to appreciate the art that you put out. The people who have made a difference in this world are consistently the people who have kicked against the norms, who have done things different, who have stood up, who are unafraid to do something different. Even with the ridicule or something that might occur, they were willing to do it anyway. And I think that's the message that we need to continue to showcase in the world today is pick yourself up. You can create. You are an artist. You can create something that's worthwhile. And there are communities today more than there ever has been that will appreciate the art that you're building.
Wise words from a really smart guy. Tyler, we appreciate everything. We appreciate hearing your backstory and kind of where you're at now. And there's so much to learn from this conversation. We really appreciate the time you've taken to talk with us today, man.
You bet. Thanks for the invite, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we will definitely be in touch. If you need anything, reach out, let us know, man. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet.
Okay. Thanks, Tyler. Great to meet you.
Likewise, Josh. Thank you.
Hello, it's Corey here, and I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy Podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy Podcast.